session with an invocation of a song. Share the screen, please. And I request respect. So, thank you so much for your kind attention. This is the invocation song with a deep message of protection of environment. It is a great pleasure and indeed an honor to have available with us distinguished speaker, respected friends, and dear participants. Today we have topic which we titled Unorthodox Coalitions, Co-Creative Media Narrations for Transformative Critical Sustainability Studies. And this is the very heart and soul of the very basic question of sustainable development or sustainability studies is how to protect Earth or our planet. We have with us as a speaker of today's session, Dr. Ida Elif Tibet from University of Bern. I welcome Dr. Ida. I welcome moderator of today's session, Professor Ananta Giri from Madras Development Institute, Professor Gyan Gului, Minati Pradhan ji, and there are so many participants who watch our program from Facebook platform. I welcome all of you. Let me give a brief introduction to our speaker of today's session, Dr. Ada. She is a passionate, award-winning documentary filmmaker and a deep seeker of anthropological insight. She has deep interest in visual anthropology, who leads GDF's media outreach strategy, amplifying a vision for a more just and regenerative planet. His, uh, she has also very deep interest in medias and communications. She has been documenting the cultural landscapes of high Atlas Mountains of Morocco and has been a core faculty and mentor at the GESA, which stands for Global produced numerous films which have made it to film festivals around the world. Many programs also broadcast on television channel and various social media or digital streams. Being a independent filmmaker, she has some deep insight of media communication. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Dr. Ida. Uh, Let me also give a kind of brief introduction to our circle. Our circle is named Swadhyay Sahchakra. It is a co-learning circle of self and mutual studies, which is basically a initiative or it is a kind of call for all people who like to think together, who like to think about self, think about culture, societies, and the world. We found many seekers, like-minded people from different fields of life, from different uh, streams of thinking, from different movements of social and cultural life in our contemporary world. We basically cultivate the idea of Mahatma Gandhi, Chitranjan Das, a creative soul thinker from Odisha, and our inspiration, Sri Aurobindo, was a great philosopher of India. And many around the world, we also our we also present our uh, work in terms of written articles, in terms of dialogue, keeping in mind that there is a possibility of all solution, all existential problem of this world by the way of communication, by the path of dialogue. So we invite seekers from different fields of life. We organize weekly dialogue, sometimes on Wednesday also. Almost every Sunday we have one dialogue. So with this brief introduction, uh, may I like to invite moderator of today's session, Professor Anand Kumar Giri, to kindly give a brief introduction of the topic of today's session, and then we will listen Dr. Ida. Yes, so over to you, Ananta bhai.
Thank you so much, dear Randhir. And thank you, Dr. Eda Elif Tibet, Dr. Eda, and all friends co-present this evening, this afternoon, for being part of this very exciting and inviting journey of thinking and being. Dr. Eda's paper, Unorthodox Coalition, Co-Creative Media Initiative for Transformative Critical Sustainable Studies. It really explores many deep issues. And let me also offer my thanks to Dr. Rama Mani, who first introduced me to Dr. Eda. and also Professor Alexander Schiffer. And I think they are very creative initiators. And Dr. Eda has mentioned about their work in our paper. And in her paper, Dr. Eda talks about many important challenges as well as emerging practice. One is transformative education, and the other is transdisciplinarity, and also rethinking the very idea and space of university. And here, uh, transformative education and how universities become centers and movements of transformative education. And this has to be undertaken in the context of the contemporary time, where the universities are being destroyed, the very purpose of university. You look at, for example, the idea of Humboldtian University that really animated the whole creative spirit of the university, Humboldt, Bildung, self-formation. And it is in this context, as Dr. Eda is also an anthropologist, maybe anthropologist with openness. This morning, I am reading a very important work of the great anthropological thinker, Professor Tim Ingold, who taught at University of Aberdeen for a long time, and whose work also is deeply relevant for sustainable studies, for rethinking environment. He has a very important essay called Creating Universities for the Commons, and in which he is challenging us to realize that how the very idea of the university as a place of learning and as a place of the care for community and the world is being destroyed through commodification, through marketization of university. And here he challenges us to how do we recreate university as a place of freedom. And freedom is very different from the abuses that it has been done, trust, education, and community. And in a way, the whole media lab that Dr. Eda is presenting, it also establishes creative links with communities. And these communities are different kinds. There are also creative communities of filmmakers who are establishing connection with the communities on the ground. Now, Professor Ingold, he refers to a very important line from the great philosopher and activist Hannah Arendt. And Hannah Arendt tells us, do we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it? And I think the whole challenge of transformative education today is vis-a-vis the commodification of knowledge, both teachers, students, and university, that how do we respond to this foundational challenge? How do the co-creative laboratories, the creative laboratories that Dr. Eda is discussing, this laboratory is also a laboratory of care of, first of all, our knowing subject. And that brings us to transdisciplinarity. And transdisciplinarity is much more than just interdisciplinarity. Transdisciplinarity, as Dr. Eda is hinting at, it is a collaborative process. And that, how is that collaboration possible without what, building on Sri Aurobindo, we might call a yoga of collaboration. And that means a really a devotion to collaboration, not only as a network process in the university, but also collaborating with the higher self, with the evolutionary self within ourselves and each other. So therefore, this theme and transdisciplinarity also, I wish to suggest that a fellow academic and a friend from University of Geneva, Professor Lawrence, is editing an handbook of transdisciplinarity, which is just coming out, an international handbook of transdisciplinarity, which is a kind of bringing these kind of cutting edge challenges, in which I have an essay called, transdisciplinarity and a new pragmatics and hermeneutics of self-knowledge and society. So this collaboration also involves meeting. What happens when we meet? So I would briefly present to you a poem called Creative Meetings. It goes like this. I love creative people. When I see one such, I feel a connection, hear a melody and a vibration. I was hesitant to come, but when I reached here, I felt I needed to be here. It is not just a seminar, but a meeting of souls, meditative eyes and silent lovers, yearning and walking for long, time and eternity kissing each other, a pilgrimage of love. So thank you and a warm welcome to Dr. Eda for our presentation, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introductions, dear Dr. Randhir and Ananta, Giri, and yes, thanks to Ramamani and Alexander Schiffer that our roads have crossed. And I was I just want you to know that I really enjoyed working on this paper together with Susan Thieme. And we were, I think, encouraged to write about the experiential and experimental things that we're doing at the university, which is not very commonplace right now, thanks to your book idea. And I was mostly intrigued by how you framed media and meditation and mediation at the same line, and I thought, wow, that is very interesting. And then when you sent me this poster yesterday, which was a surprise to me because I didn't know that this was going to be a dialogue between the between us, but I thought it was more like people presenting their papers, so there will be a few authors. So I was really not prepared in that sense. But then I thought this is even better to be able to have this much space to actually talk about what is emerging. I noticed at the poster that you have the picture of Gandhi and you have the Asian Center of Asian for Blossoming. And I thought this is even more and more interesting now because this is not, I think, this spiritual perspective is what we're really missing here in the West, in Europe. And I by no means define as or identify as a Western scholar, first of all. I am originally from Turkey. I'm from Istanbul. I've been grown up in several places, mostly in Istanbul and then as well as in Portugal, in Spain, because of my father's work. And I think all that multicultural upbringing has led to my interest to understanding different cultures. And especially anthropology is a passion that I picked up actually during my time in India. So I did spend quite some time in India studying and traveling mostly, and in the quest of finding my best self. I think a lot of people do that. They just, a lot of young people. I was 19 years old when I first bought my ticket and went come to be incredible India, beautiful India. And I lived firstly in Hyderabad, where I was doing an internship with the Indian School of Business, is where I met with a concept called spiritual business. And I've never heard of such a thing. And I never believed that it could be possible to do spiritual business. But apparently it is. And so, and at that time, my introduction to sustainability was also in India at the Indian School of Business, is when Jeffrey Sachs, this American economist, came up with the idea of the Millennium Development Goals. And I read it as if I'm reading something that is going to change the world. And it was after many, many years that only in, I think, 2017, most countries signed it as a mandate, as a policy, the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. And then here I am at the Sustainability Institute, but our professor, Suzanne Thieme, also thought, well, we really need to be critical about the idea of sustainability. So the unit decided to change its name from Sustainability Institute to Critical Sustainability Unit. And why are we critical about sustainability is because, to my belief, it is not a very inclusive concept. There is still a lot of epistemological hegemony over the West, over the global North, from the global North over the global South. And I think being critical is much needed in the sense that we should not be only bringing in their approaches to what sustainability should mean, but bring also our approaches from the South to what we actually could mean by sustainability. So then at the same time, while I was learning about Jeffrey Sachs-Man's sustainability goals, I was also reading another book by a Bangladeshi author called Muhammad Yunus, and maybe you heard of him with his work on microfinance and microcredits. To me, that book was even more interesting, actually more and more interesting, because it was really talking about the grassroots and the participation of the grassroots in making that change, that every individual has the potential to actually just support themselves if they are provided with the means, but they are not made to depend on donations or on philanthropy, which is at the moment, as the world is, it is unfortunately the 1% having controlling the 99%. And that, after many years, linked me to Vandana Shiva's work. So I realized that I have a lot of influence by Indian thinkers and Indian scholars, and I didn't realize that till I actually wrote this paper. And I don't think it is I don't think it is a coincidence that I ended up collaborating on this paper with Suzanne Thieme, two Indian editors and Indian scholars. So I would now like to share my slide with you of how I ended up getting very interested with the issue of sustainability. But more and more, I'm interested in creating anew, moving beyond the term sustainability. And I believe we argue that is only possible when we break the disciplinary silos and we go beyond epistemological or even ontological constraints. And we really force ourselves to think from as multiple different perspectives, cosmologies and ways of living as much as possible. So I will now share my screen. But before I share my screen, I think you have the paper, so I believe people who are very interested could have a look through. But I'm speaking about a particular media initiative, the Media Lab. And this is the part which Suzanne Thieme should have been sharing if she was here with us, the professor who actually founded the initiative as a lab at the University of Bern at the Geography Institute. She's also the head of the Critical Sustainability Unit. And in our paper, we talked about 3 major coalitions as unorthodox coalitions. So one is the part where she's the one who's writing about teaching transdisciplinarity through practice, partners, and the social learning video as a method. And there is a second coalition that is about collaborating with the Global Science Film Festival. And I did participate in a lot of that collaboration as well. And majorly my presentation will be on the coalition, the third coalition that is mentioned in our paper, which is called Animating the Commons as an Applied Media Research Initiative. So I'll be mostly talking about the third coalition because that is the part that I have contributed with. So I will be sharing now my presentation. So before I start with sharing the inspiration behind this, is I want to show you the mapping of all the initiatives that or collaborations and partnerships our Animating the Commons initiative is hosting. And it is being hosted at the University of Bern, but is by no means dependent or is by no means restricted to be at the University of Bern. This initiative can be anywhere really, because it is mostly important. What is mostly important is that it's kind of free, independent, and there is a possibility that it kind of grows, because at the end it is really an ecosystem work. It is about bringing lots of different stakeholders, lots of different initiatives to work for common causes and common projects that may be applied research initiatives, or they might be also just artistic projects. But most at the heart of most what we do is really bringing inspiring stories to the front line by partnering, allying with change makers, visionaries, researchers, scholars with every kind of background that one can imagine, media practitioners as well. So the scope of it is quite large in the sense that the scope has to do with something else, but not really bounded to a restriction of being part of an institution or not. And so that's why we call it also the commons, because the most common thing that human beings have is the urge to create and the urge to be out there in the world freely. We all look for freedom. And it just gets very complicated once we are becoming part of structures, infrastructures, once we are going into that matrix of web of relationships that are not always necessarily liberating. So when I shared my ideas with Professor Susan Thieme, who is a professor trying to transform, unfortunately, the neoliberal institution that is at the heart of Switzerland, was very, very interested in that. And she gave me full liberty and freedom to do what I thought could have transformed it, the current state of academia. And as you all know, academic merit is still kind of depending on the right references and the many publications and the many grants, fellowships one gets. But I kind of moved beyond those restrictions, and I liberated by myself by saying that there are indefinite possibilities in the world, and I'm not just restricted to academic funds. I could do lots of creative fundraising, and as well as I could experiment with different income earning and different models as well. So this is kind of new in that sense, that is kind of entrepreneurial, but more to it is very creative, is very artistic, but as well as it's very scientific. And I would like to share the people who inspired the way of thinking and the way of putting all of this. And I will also then share a little bit about the vision and about the projects that we made throughout the last 3 years, but also with a little bit of a background to what has been done before. So who were the people inspiring? But before who were the people inspiring, I think what was the major question for me? My major question was looking for the possibility of living in a different world, living in a world that is not identified by domination, power, but is identified by unity and solidarity, compassion and collaboration, radical collaboration. So how would that be possible? And just as Ananta, Professor Ananta mentioned, how can be our best selves? It was that same question Jean Houston, a wonderful scholar who's written 34, 35 books about the potential of humanity. And she's kind of the co-creator of the Humanity's Best Potential movement during the 70s. It is a lot to do with inner work, actually. You know, as oftentimes as scientists, we are trying to understand the world, the surroundings, and our environment, but little we do to understand our inner selves. But to my mind, understanding who you truly are and who you can become will make a big difference in the way you also perceive the world. So the possible human, the possible world, the inner work, a mythic life, a passion for the possible, and the guide to realizing our true potential has been kind of my major inspiration and background in there. And I got to learn about Jean Houston's work through Ramamani and Alexander Schiffer, who I collaborate with. And I will tell you a lot more about them in the coming slides, who are my mentors in life. And this is Margaret Mead. As you all know, Margaret Mead is one of the most known anthropologists in the world. And she's done a lot for visual anthropology with her former husband, Gregory Bateson. They produced a lot of work about coming of age and ethnographic observations. And no wonder, actually, Margaret Mead was kind of a spiritual daughter of Jean Houston. So Jean Houston also might have indirectly, directly inspired anthropology, visual anthropology today through Margaret Mead. And here there are all the other names that you will see who I'm inspired of, and those in yellow colors, I just realized that are those of India origin, Indian scholars. Homi Bhabha, who lives, I think now in the US, but was originally from Bombay. It is his theory, third space, that I applied. By the way, don't see any faces. I don't know if it's possible to open some videos so I can see the audience, the people, or is this because, is it better not to have videos because of the internet connection, or let me know? Because I think it would be really nice that it's more like a dialogue and less like me giving a lecture or a presentation. What do you think? Because I just feel like I am alone here speaking. Is there anybody there? There's no one there.
Yes, I am here. We are, please. So we are here together. Please continue.
Of course, but I'm not sure if others are here.
Yes, please continue. Because of some internet problem, people may not open their videos.
I see. Okay. Well, Ananta, how long do you think maybe I stop in 10 minutes and we can have questions or dialogue?
No, you You can take another 10 minutes or so. We would like to hear a little more about substantive issues. So you can take, then we would have dialogue, please.
Okay, great. I was just checking out because I wouldn't want
So
I wouldn't
that
want to be talking for an hour. Yes.
So you can kindly speak till 6 p.m. another 15 minutes. Then we have a good amount of time for mutual conversation, please.
Okay. So at the heart of things, and at the substantial issues that Mr. Ananta was mentioning, is how do you function between science and arts and research, basically by making use of participatory action research. And as an engaged anthropologist, I do bring in studies from critical sustainability, and we connect that with multimodal media methodologies, and through a mobility justice lens. And we do that with the idea that knowledge should be accessible and transformative for all. We see science as commons, and this would kind of help us to bring in more participation, recognition, visibility, and transformation into the kind of scholarship that we're doing. So for me, there are some areas of questions and methods, arguments that I'm bringing into this discussion. So I'm asking, how can we move from transactive field works to justful dream work, where your field work or your research is actually supporting people's dreams, most often the case with the migration studies. Effective multimodality is kind of a methodology that we bring forward in enabling that, questioning how co-creation work. What does creativity mean, but what does co-creation mean, especially in media studies? What do we mean by unorthodox coalitions? How do we build alliances? And then what do we do to transform? So how do we shift paradigms? How do we change narratives to influence policy and the wider society, and to shift systems? So everything started with my PhD study, which I called Learning to be Freed. It was a 4 years research project with unaccompanied asylum-seeking youth, taking place in Turkey with a lot of refugee asylum-seeking youth. And with them is that I started to develop the methodology, effective multimodalities, by applying Homi Bhabha's theory, third space. And there I did deal with the methodologies of Gayatri Spivak's. Maybe you heard of her from her wonderful book, Can the Subaltern Speak? And how we go beyond categories to actually represent people in their best selves, in their best potential, and with their talents, rather than the categories that the systems and the nation states put on them, like refugee, asylum-seeking person, Black man. All these are kind of categories that are put on people, but they do not necessarily represent who they truly are. So how do we humanize research and studies in the face of great colonialism? And then how do we learn to be freed as people and as scholars in the work of representation? And we do that by unlearning, going beyond categories, and co-creation. So then throughout this book that I'm wishing that it will publish next year, I am trying to translate what the theory, third space, could look like or mean through this empirical example that we're sharing hereby in the case of unaccompanied asylum-seeking youth in Istanbul at this shelter. So we deal with some of these concepts: paradoxical worlds, afterlife, mistranslation, a displaced angle of vision. For those interested, I could always share the link of the book once it's coming up. And writing a book, basically, if you realize this is a manuscript, but you see his name next to mine, Abdi Dex, who has been one of the key persons that the study wouldn't have taken place if it wasn't for him. And he was an unaccompanied asylum-seeking youth himself from Somalia. And he was the one who was initiating the photography workshops, the media engagements with the young people who we were doing the workshops together with. And also we conducted a radio show with the people. So I suppose I was inspired with the idea of multimodality because it was not about, you know, one could always say, I'm just doing photography, I'm just doing films, I'm just doing video. What is the reason behind mixing all of them? And I will tell you why it was beneficial and useful to mix all of them, or at least some of them, in the co-creation of knowledge together. So writing a book to writing opinion pieces to journals or other kind of general audience publications is also part of that multimodality. Putting up an exhibition, writing a journal publication to a youth journal is another part of that multimodality. And then becoming famous with media's attention is also part of that multimodality. So you see how it served us in different ways, as a tool of Abdi's being more visible, as a tool of him being empowered. And through this work, he got a scholarship at the end and became only one of the 1% of refugees in the world having access to higher education. So apparently our work had an activist sense, and we base it with youth participatory action research. So we did exactly the opposite of what most scholars argued, that you should always kind of anonymize the people you study. You should not put them on the front line. They're vulnerable and they might get victimized and they are traumatized and it's not good for them. There is this like perception of hiding these people that you study. And it's not, there's also this perception and practice of working on them rather than working with them, working about them rather than working through within with them. So our study was completely going against that and saying, well, you know what, we're doing this together because a 17-year-old Somali man who can speak 5 languages also has much to bring into this world. And he's not a refugee only. He's more than that. He's an aspiring young filmmaker, an extremely talented photographer, a social scientist by heart. And, you know, it's shouldn't be treated just as an extraordinary personality, but also someone who could thrive. He was believed in and he was seen. So how do you see someone is very important in media and representation, but not only in life in general. How we treat each other, how scholars treat people they are studying with is is a big deal, and it's a very transformative deal starting there. So multimodality, in a nutshell, is really an interdisciplinary approach, understands communication and representation to be more than about language. And it's been developed over the past decade, has to do with also is developing with new media and technologies. So there's a lot more and more and more each year coming up. Any of these could be multimodal approaches, websites, infographics, animations, documentary films, desktop documentaries, audiovisual recordings, but they're also their own entities. So I wouldn't say that I'm trying to create an umbrella term to put everything that, you know, that belongs to arts and performative media studies. But it could be fed by these, you know, entities that have a life and discipline for their own. So say festival creation, theater is something big itself. So I wouldn't say, don't get me wrong when I say multimodality has it all, but can benefit from all or collaborating with all. And affection, why is affection very, very dear and important to me is because the interest to the work of a social scientist, to my mind, should be genuine and should be for the betterment of the society and the world. Like, we need to have a purpose behind this work. So comes back to the question, is art just for arts, or is art really for people, for the society? And for me, it is definitely for the people. I don't like to work, I wouldn't like to work on anything that doesn't have a name. Otherwise, I would feel it is just more about, you know, showing off. So I think it's important that it's not only about the self, but it's about the wider belonging that the self is serving to. And I wouldn't mean that that should only be done in a selfless way, but how can that be done in a more inclusive way? So I'm trying to bring in this concept called effective multimodality, which is really at the heart, by making use of all the post-colonial thought authors that I shared with you there, and in bringing the multimodal anthropology lens to gather and co-create research and science for realizing people's dreams. And dream work is really important for me. So I, as an anthropologist who uses field work as a major methodology, I like to use the word dream work and not field work, because only if we took people's dreams into consideration, including our dreams, we would understand more than what the mind can understand from the conscious world, but also by looking into the subconscious world, right? So what do? I map the discursive media constructions. I look at how people and things are categorized and how actually they're used as means to regulate and control people. You know, mobile pastoralists, indigenous tribes, refugees. These are the people we make films together with. That's why I'm sharing. And then we counteract to those major narratives by showcasing individuals, collectives, personal and collective responses, life worlds and talents in relation to their own political assemblages, to state actions and environmental challenges. So in their own actions of affect, in their own media mediation practices, towards the realization of their dreams by using various multimodalities as tools to produce and engage beyond academic institutional hierarchies. Because to be creative, we need to be free. We can't be controlled. So what do we mean by co-creation? What would that look like? You know, I like the metaphor of the butterfly. You know, how does one become a butterfly? How do you go into that metamorphosis from a caterpillar into liberating the black man? And here are some of the films that we did with change makers, local livelihood, on local livelihoods, and on people who are living beyond, you know, common understandings of what, you know, systems look like. For instance, the first film, Hey Goat. Yeah, the first, well, they're not chronological, but I think I put them in a way that they're more, because they're kind of similar in the sense of style and approach. So the Hey Goat was a film we did with collaborating with the foundation, with the mobile pastoralists of Turkey, and its aim was to discuss water scarcity and the threat mobile pastoralists feel today in Turkey due to forced sedentary policies on them. So they have more and more limited, narrowed movement abilities. So we were questioning, what would this tradition look like if mobile pastoralists weren't mobile anymore? You know, what would that mean? And Amchi is again a film we did together with another NGO in Leh, Ladakh, many years ago, 2012, nearly 10 years ago, unbelievable. And the main protagonist, Amchi Karma Chodon, who actually inspired the name of our label, Karma Motion. is the person who was serving and bringing Tibetan medicine practices and knowledge to her students in the remote areas of the Himalayas in Zanskar. And this was one of her last trips to this very remote village in Zanskar region to teach once more a class on woman and reproduction anatomy to her young female students who would become local village amchis, Tibetan doctors. And it was a beautiful, beautiful time with them. I did not have the intention of making a film. I just happened to have my camera. I was there as a person who was sent by a friend, by an acquaintance from England where I was studying, to actually support them reporting and writing their financial and activity reports to their funders. And then they took me to this incredible journey, and I happened to have my camera. And I just documented all those amazing moments, of course, with the consent of the Amchi. And then we decided we could actually bring it to become a film. It's a very shaky film with, no time to build a tripod and so on. But I think this film made a lot of difference and empowered Amchi Karma's work, as she received the Best Humanitarian Award by a film festival in Indonesia. And that kind of really helped boost her profile in the place. And she received some funding to open up her clinic. So in that sense, the film had a noble impact on her work and as well as on mine. And my surname being Tibet is also another interesting thing. It has a long story from my ancestors, but I think that also kind of enabled my access to the story that the Tibetan people thought that was way too cool to have a surname that is very dear to them. 28 Days on the Moon is the first film I've ever done. It was my first anthropology film assignment, and it had to do with me questioning my roots, my background, because I come from this village where this film is being shot, and it's a moon-like looking space, landscape. It was the landscape emerged from the eruption of a volcano thousands of years ago. And people then started dwelling in these caves, which looked like fairy chimneys. And I was looking into the life of people in a UNESCO World Heritage Site and understanding what troglodyte living looked like. And it had to do a lot with pigeon breeding and vineyard keeping. I can share all these films with you all. I have links if you'd be interested. So the film had to do, so it is, as you see, me from my own inner, cultural connections to Turkey to all the way to Tibet, this inner and outer work, constant inner and outer loop of understanding who I am, understanding what others do, to me was a nice dance between the two. So it is very important that we do work on our own cultures and our own places, but it's also very good to go beyond that, just me, because I'm a Turkish anthropologist, I will be studying and researching about Turkey all my life, to actually being able to say, well, I'm also interested in getting to know how Tibetan doctors work in Ladakh in India. I mean, why wouldn't that be a possibility? And what would that have to offer to someone in their foreign scholar's life? And then that is one thing with local communities and different living practices, with the ideals of supporting people's causes and supporting local livelihood issues, so people could raise awareness about the areas they need to be able to secure their livelihoods. I also moved into another field of musical documentary films with forced displaced peoples, with exiled musicians and refugees. And I worked more from an individual, personal level. So, as an anthropologist, you're expected to also do work with societies and communities. But then it is also possible that you work one-to-one on, self-ethnographies, autoethnographies, duo-ethnographies, And that work is also very interesting to my mind, because then you're also going against that common conception people have, that, you know, when you talk about a refugee from Syria, it is like all Syrians. You're talking about all the Syrians. That's wrong, right? Like, a refugee from Syria cannot mean all the refugees from Syria are that way. But unfortunately, that's the kind of common media narrative that was out there. You know, all Syrians are coming to get our jobs in Europe. All Syrians are a threat to Europe's, you know, Christian community because they're Muslims. Things like that. Or this black man from Congo is a threat to our women's security in Europe, because, you know, why would Europe need a black man from Congo to come through without a visa? So instead of that, we wanted to transform the narrative again to showcasing what actually people had to bring, their unique talents, again, their uniqueness as people, and that they should not be seen only just from where they're coming from, which are the countries that are going through worse, right? The Democratic Republic of Congo has suffered immense violence for many years. Syria has been suffering immense violence since 2012. So how do you change the narrative that is against, when the whole world is against you? What is it that one person can do, right? We have created these musical documentary films to transcend borders through musical autoethnographies, and they were highly acknowledged by anthropological societies as well as mainstream film festivals. And then, yeah, Aitata is one of those films, with this time about pastoralists of Morocco. The film will be broadcast on a TV channel, Arte TV channel, very soon. And this is also kind of a new experience as an independent documentary filmmaker, to be able to have a very broad TV audience. So I'm wondering, what would that look like with the kind of film that we've produced? And Home for Humanity is a film that was completely intended to recruit people to become part of a social movement that Rama Mani and her husband Alexander Schiffer are building at their home campus, which they call the Home for Humanity, for transformative education, to create people, to transform pedagogy into center around the home, which is then the intention is to create a better home for the outer world. So Soul Wound is another collaboration with the Global Science Film Festival. It was a workshop with scientists from all over Switzerland, and the man you see in the poster is from Rwanda. He's a genocide himself. He was 5 years old when that stuff was happening around, and many years later he comes as a PhD student to University of Zurich. And he had this idea that he wanted to do a film expressing what historical trauma looked like. And I kind of mentored and supported the people, the scientists, to create this wonderful short film, which then helped him raise awareness for his science. So scientific outreach, so to speak. A new collaboration is called Our Common Story, which is me and my partner, Inanç Tekgüç, traveling around the Mediterranean basin as part of an alliance for Mediterranean nature and culture. We are collecting stories of resilience and hope by changemakers and local community members, NGO workers, advocates who are in support of cultural landscapes in the face of climate change. And then finally, I will be ending with another media initiative. You saw all these films, collaborations, and now I'd like to show you that I'm also involved in creating a film festival, which showcases visual anthropology films as well as documentary films. And each year we have a theme. So last year was called Beyond Asymmetries. This year we did one called Belonging, and we invited Dalai Lama's sister, Jetsun Pema, to come and be with us to present a vision talk, and as well as we screened her film. That there is a new film now about her life called Amala. So the idea is also not just to be producing films ourselves, but also to be opening and making use of spaces where we could host other filmmakers' works, but especially our film festival is dedicated to visionaries and visionary storytellers. And we have a concept called Vision Talks that accompanies these films, which becomes a performative creative discourse by visionaries from around the world. And they use storytelling modalities based on real life experiences throughout their talks on stage. And they get the chance to connect with the audience, presenting their groundbreaking visionary projects and inspirational perspectives on life. And each present will then come together as part of a talk show. And we do this very close to the Bundeshaus, to the Parliament House in Switzerland. So, you know, the stories then kind of circulate and go nearby. And I think that strategically being located in Bern is also kind of strong idea in that sense. So you see a lot of activism, you see a lot of going beyond, you know, I do one thing into I can do and accommodate many things, and I do not need to be the one doing all these things. So I am not the one doing all these things. What my capacity allows me to do is I do one film a year, but it takes 2 to 3 years to actually do the prep work, the research. So in total, sometimes a year, 2 years for a film. But then life has become more than just telling films, but it's also creating these spaces, venues where people get to interact, engage. And then that is how I learned so much, and that this whole applied multimodal interventions become my study cases. And then I bring that knowledge into academia by saying, you know, these are what my learnings are, because I've been just very much engaged in the field by people who are doing wonderful things. So this is it. This is all my presentation. Why did it matter to me? What did this work allow me to do by collaborating with lots of different organizations into telling transformative stories? It helped us visualize the invisible. We terrorized only for transformation. It helped us mobilize the local and the global. We have been able to communicate, you know, our values and ethics as much as we could. We engaged and acknowledged research participants as partners, as co-authors, but not as people who are just being studied. Our impact went beyond journals, the beyond journal impacts. It's all open source, it's all for the commons, and nothing is for profit. And the aim has been really to try for social impact and work towards change at a systemic level. So thank you. And I leave my email hereby in case you'd like to know more and exchange more.
Thank you so much. And I should say meherba.
Merhaba.
Meherba, you know, I tesakuler meherba, and you know, listening to you is a blessing. You know, really, the journey that you have embodied yourself, and how multimodality is not just a method, but a way of being, a way of living. And so I'm personally grateful to you and all of us. And as I was listening to you, so this whole multimodality and your reference to Arturo Escobar in your paper, his relational ontology, and it also reminds me of the work of Agamben, And this morning I was reading a very deep thought of a very dear and respected friend who in many ways is a kind of an inspiring co-creator like yourself. His name is Paul, based in Canada. And he has contributed a paper on Gandhi and Agamben, in which he's discussing Agamben's work called modal ontology. And very interesting, though I have to know more about it. Therefore, this multimodality is not just a method, it's a way of being, and you have really shown us, and especially how multimodality is a way of creating space, and that creating space is a space of gathering. And so thank you. And now, dear friend, let us join Eda in offering our heartfelt compliment. And I could try my little German. Thank you well from meine Herz. And so please let us have questions, thoughts, and conversations, please. And you can kindly raise your hand or write in the chat box. Okay, to initiate the conversation, as we are waiting, let me invite Gyan Luigi, please. Gyan, he's not here. Then Minati, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone.
And now you can put on your video, please, if you don't mind.
Yes, I'm more visible like yes. So I would like to thank Dr. Ida Tibet for her very detailed, and I was very engrossed looking at the things and listening to her. So I don't have such any question. Okay, one small query. So I was just thinking, how does she take her work? See, now we see in the mainstream all the documentary films and short films, they are getting recognized in film festivals. But if you see in practicality, it does not go to the grassroots level, doesn't come to the mainstream. What can be done, and how we can engage in media to make the transformative work more successful? So that was one query I just wanted to know from her. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I mean, films really do have different dissemination platforms. For films, there are film festivals, but then that is not the only option, depending on what the film is trying to achieve. It is also possible that one organizes or becomes part of some community screenings, which is always an option, and we try to do as much as possible. But you really do need a person supporting you with that. I think a filmmaker needs to also learn to collaborate with more and more people. That is not only about the making or the production of the film, but it's also about thinking about its impact and dissemination later on. And that is a question that has to do with that. Okay, you make this film, it goes to a film festival, but then what's next? That is such a cycle, and it's depending on also the kind of producers you have. Some producers really do create a map for you for the dissemination of the film. But when it is for activist films with a cause, with films for advocacy, it is really people who need to come together, who are directly involved in the making of the film, to create a strategy together. You know, how much of this we would like to share with the communities, how much of this way we could share with the TV channel, with the radio. Can we sell DVDs? In the past, we used to sell DVDs. Now it doesn't exist anymore. You know, DVDs are completely out of the range now. Digital streaming platforms are on the rise. Social media is on the rise. So one could be sharing a lot of snippets and moments through by incorporating transmedia storytelling, so the film can continue in different platforms and can have its own life by being shared in different amounts or parts. But that is what it needs to be done, is the creators need to come together and collaborate with those who are willing to disseminate and support, enable the sharing with as wider and wider as possible.
Thank you. I just would like to share something, my own experience. I do write some short stories on the social issues. So just I approached a few filmmakers, short filmmakers. So just to on COVID and untouchabilities, a few things were there. You know, everybody's reply is like, we are now concentrating on what is the profit making things like. Okay, so that is why I wanted to know this particular question. How, you know, you want to, I cannot make a film, but I can just write for the films. For that is the, you know, there is no collaboration, and you just get disheartened and demotivated. Okay, that is not for, so in a collective sense, we should all work together. That was thank you so much for your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that you get dismotivated. Really don't. It's just that means you didn't find the right people yet. There's always the right people for you who would believe in your vision, and who would be your third eye, fourth eye. At the end, it's really up to you how you inspire, how you convince people to join your efforts. It is a lot of community building there, that work. Of course, it always helps when you know how to use the camera yourself, so you can do all the work. But you know, that also comes with a lot of training and a lot of, I don't know, systemic, you know, trial and error. So I wasn't born from my mother's womb as a camera person. I really kind of had to learn it all. And, you know, practicing is kind of the essential. But you know, nowadays young people are so media literate. They don't even need to go to schools anymore to learn how to make films, which is good news. So you could always collaborate with people who have that passion and enthusiasm, and could be your, you know, third eye, fourth, you know, your arms and legs in whatever you're trying to achieve. I'm sure you can always find these people, but where to look at, how to find them is completely something I wouldn't be able to. Maybe some networks, some alliances, some solidarity groups, or a possibility could be to build capacity with the people you're already working. Maybe some has talents, you know, that would be able to. But there's a wonderful Indian film called, it was a film about writing with fire. Have you heard of this? It's a documentary film. I can share now on the chat. It was produced with very, very, you know, with women who were from the very underprivileged part of segments of India, becoming journalists. And this film was nominated for the Oscars. I think a year ago. It is an amazing film, but it was also kind of quite discussed, and there were some controversies about it. But it was really mostly women with their cell phones making this film, while they were reporting on huge injustices, you know, on issues around injustices. Writing with Fire, Sushmit, the filmmaker's name. But I will send you the link. It is quite inspiring. So content, I think, the content of the story nothing beats that, and it's more important. This is my personal opinion, my humble opinion. That is, to my mind, is more important than the technical quality of what you could be producing. But the contents, the qualities, yeah, for me is there.
Thank you, Eda. And
There's a
Minati,
question.
for this. Yes, from now onwards, we will have a few questions together. Then you can kindly take a note and share. We have Professor Akshay raising his hand. Professor Akshay, please.
Yes. Sir, am I audible?
Yes, can you please put your video on?
Yes, sir. I will try.
Okay.
There is some technical error, but I will try. Sir, Ila ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Ila ma'am, very good evening. Dr. Ila.
Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you. Yes.
So, ma'am, your session was really very inspiring. Hello, ma'am is not.
Yes, we can hear you. Please continue. We can hear you, please.
Okay. So, Ila ma'am, your session was really very different and very inspiring. So, I really appreciate and thank you for it. Ma'am, you mentioned one point that is spiritual business, right? So, can you please elaborate about it?
Okay, thank you. She has asked about spiritual business. You can come a little later. Other questions, please. Professor Akshay, you can mute yourself. And other questions, please. Now, Randhir, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ida. It was really very insightful session. And my question is, anthropologists have a, unique expertise that allows them to mediate between the worlds. But usually it is a kind of criticism for anthropologists. They have a kind of dichotomy in their mind to construct reality as per their interest. So we have a whole conception of decolonizing methodology of Linda Smith. She also raised this whole question of so my query is what is the skill, useful set of a skill, so that a wrong interpretation or a value added interpretation cannot come. Usually what happens that people do not have a kind of line between the travel reporter and the ethnographer, and that is the blurred line. That is why the whole even with the advent of this visual anthropology, we are not able to conceptualize this blurred line. So therefore we have many studies in travel studies, visual ethnography or travel studies. They did not come with proper interpretation of their reality. The question is with different sense that whether that studies had something to do with commercialization or empowerment, because that is something which anthropology always a kind of engaged with this question of particularly visual anthropology, whether their studies led them to be just agent of commercialization or for that matter empowerment. So these are the some of my important considerations. And since you are already engaged in this work, so means why don't we have this sort of understanding in the very primary school or primary curriculum, even means for that matter, if you want to become an anthropologist, why don't we discuss this thing in a very initial stage of becoming expert or having a skill of anthropological gauge? So thank you so much.
Thank you, Randhir. Now, Kunga Sherpa, please. Very quickly. Okay, Manoranjan Sahu. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please. Can you open your video?
Yes, sir.
Namaskar. Where are you, Manoranjan Babu? Where are you based now?
Sir, I am from Odisha, Bhubaneswar.
Acha, lovely. What do you do, please?
I am a research scholar. I am doing my research in computer science in the field of cloud computing.
Where? In which university?
C.V. Raman Global University.
Acha, welcome, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Please share some thoughts.
Can I say, sir, the previous session was very nice. I was watching fully, and the ma'am what she told was very interesting and very informative information. That's all, sir.
You can sing a song to appreciate. Can you sing a song?
No, sir, I don't know possible.
Okay. Okay, thanks for joining. And now,
Thank you.
Eda, please, your thoughts on this.
Sir, what thoughts?
Thank you. The second question is, what is the skill for having decolonized representation? How do you get to decolonize representation? That oftentimes anthropologists come with their own perceptions about what life is. But then the first question I forgot. It was about, what was it about, the first question that the lady asked?
Spiritual business.
Spiritual business.
The spiritual business. Okay. Okay. So maybe I mixed my answer to for the two. I think these two questions to me are kind of they go together, because I think the problem we see with anthropologists, you know, let's say the privileged people coming to the non-privileged man's land, there's a lot of imbalance between the two, also not necessarily monetarily, but also spiritually, because unfortunately, not unfortunately, but I would say West has become what it is today because they completely went through a path that goes, they don't really believe in the spirit, so to speak. They believe in neutrality, in objectivity. It is almost like this positivist science background that also goes into social sciences. So one needs to be not emotional, one needs to be not, manipulated by, and somehow one needs to serve like this bigger purpose that they call it science, and that is like bigger than everything else. They need to be protecting that, and that has its own way of being. And it's less personal. It should be very apolitical also. But the more they say that, actually they're not doing, I mean, I don't think they're doing justice to also what they're arguing for, and they end up just kind of breaking the links and connections of what better representations could have looked like. So to my mind, it is a matter of the spirit. There is the spirit dimension that is missing in understanding and seeing the truest essence of each and every individual, but rather trying to always categorize them. This is an essential method that they've built over the years. They've always categorized, institutionalized, categorized, comparted into divisions, right? I mean, you in India, you would know better what the Brits did. The British were very skillful in somehow coming up with these, divisions and these I don't know the English word, but this compartmentalizing things, putting them into strict boxes, like this is this is that, like this classifications, right? That's what science do. But we know with indigenous cultures, with local communities, with people who have ancestral bonding to their lands, that's not the case. They don't see divisions, but they see connections. They see things that science is not able to see. And then the moment they start talking about that, they're deemed spiritual and therefore non-scientific. So this creates a lot of tension between these two when they encounter the scientific that is blind to see the connectivity of life that is beyond what they think can only be boxed. They actually, this my personal humble opinion is, I don't think you can box anything. Of course, when you speak of natural science, obviously there's a chemistry, there's like some mathematics behind how you send a rocket to the space, obviously, but I don't think that methodology should be applied when you're trying to understand how a local community in Ladakh is governing themselves. That same approach doesn't work. It's almost ridiculous. And what is the skill we need to adapt? I think Gayatri Spivak, who's a wonderful Indian post-colonial thought author, she's one of my role models. I've seen her once in Zurich. She came. She now lives in the US. She's quite old now. Gayatri Spivak says, we need to unlearn everything we learned constantly. We constantly need to do the unlearning. So we constantly need to reset what we think we learn. And the best way is to share power. That is how I applied that spiritual dimension and the unlearning dimension, by treating and seeing every spiritual being, every being as my equal. And also that knowing that I need to be very humble. I need to be lower. This doesn't mean like lower as in, I just need to be on the back, not on the front. Like when I'm engaging with communities, listening to sufferings and pain, I need to really be listening and unlearning every misconception, prejudice I have. That's kind of the inner work that we all need to do. We should not see ourselves higher than any other being, even if we're meeting a tribe leader who literally has no money, right? But he's the leader of the tribe. He's there because he has something that we can't see. Or like this, you meet a very young person who speaks so wisely, right? But has no status. But each time they speak, they're like giving you all this poetry about life, and you can't find those things in the book. But how do you see that? How do you see those talents and beauty in the world that appears from the most unexpected places in the world? You need to be purified each time, because we're always getting intoxicated every day, right? Every day we're being told people are bad, they're coming to get us. Migrants are bad, they're coming to get us. They're stealing our jobs. Every day we're intoxicated with false information, with violent information. There's so much violent communication in the world, passive aggressions everywhere. There's so much violence. So how do we protect ourselves, and how do we protect the beauty in the world from violence? We constantly need to purify ourselves. And I think that goes well with meditation, calming the mind. I'm so glad that yoga is becoming a trend these days all around the world, thanks to India, who brought this wonderful practice. So these are my initial thoughts about the skills we need to have: more meditation and less ego. Ego is terrible, and unfortunately it is so high in scholarship, in science. It is all competition, a lot of darkness, a lot of people are dealing with their shadows in academia. That is why it is at the stage it is today, is because it's completely based on competition and less on collaboration nowadays. Therefore, for instance, me being here in Switzerland at the heart of competition, people are competing for millions of francs here, I mean, this is like the top of the mountain in terms of the amount of grants you can get, but they're miserable. They're not happy beings, I forgot that this is being recorded, but it's okay, they are people here, scholars here actually wouldn't mind me speaking this way, because I think, one needs to be honest and genuine about how they feel as well. So these are my feelings, these are my thoughts. They're miserable here. They're fighting, competing for millions of francs just to produce a few papers that nobody reads. They talk about impact and about transformation, so what? Is not inspiring, and as well as it's just a waste of time and energy. I think real work is really has to have an activist background, has to have a deeper purpose. So I'm truly here to hijack the non-spiritual realm. And I always say this openly, publicly.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much. And we should also remember that Bern is not only the capital of Switzerland, but it is blessed by a river. So, so do you hold your film festival by the river of Bern?
Yeah, the river is beautiful. There is, of course, a lot of beautiful things here in Switzerland too. And our film festival is actually hosted at an occupied house that is run by anarchists and radical scholars like myself.
So lovely. And I remember my journey to Bonn in 2006, and where I stayed with some of them and walked by the river. So thank you for your very deep thoughts. And as I was listening to you, I felt as if, your thoughts are coming from an interlinked realm. These are really, reflections of wisdom. And that is a gift that we are grateful to you, and let us collaborate with each other. So now I invite Minati to share some concluding thought and vote of thanks, please.
Hello, I was not able to unmute. Hello, am I audible now?
And you can open your video, please.
Yeah. So I can tell, I can say vote of thanks now, right? I am Minati Pradhan on behalf of Swadhyaya Sahachakra and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming. Would like to thank our today's chief speaker, Dr. Elif Tibet. Pardon me if I am pronouncing wrongly, but so thank you, ma'am, so much for your very insightful deliberation, and it was nice to listen, and it was a auditory or audiovisuals also were so delightful. I was just looking at that every minute details. I mean, no, the pictures, the titles, these things. I wish we would have more time and we could have gone through some documentaries, but it was only a discussion today. Some other time probably. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I thank our moderator, Professor Kumar Giri, for this type of webinar. Thank you, Ananta bhai. And I thank the people who participated in our webinar today, Professor Akshaya, Manoranjan Sahu, Punga Serpa, and all other Facebook platform participants and Zoom platform participants. Thank you all so much. At the last and not the least, I would like to thank our convener, Professor Randhir Kumar Gautam, for arranging and executing all these programs every weekly so nicely. Thank you, Randhir. And please pardon me if I have forgotten anybody's name. So I thank all of you and thank you.
So, thank you, Minati. Thank you, Eda. Let us meet again soon. And my regards to Professor Suzan Thim, please. And all your colleagues, including your partners and friends.
Shukriya.
Shukriya.
Dhanyavad.
Mehrbaan. Mehrbaan.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.